Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. This week, riding solo while Mike is a little busy, but wanted to kind of go through a Superman. The movie is coming out in about 2 weeks. We first wanted to talk a little bit about the greatest Superman story of all time, talked a little bit about Man of Steel, but today I wanted to go into the previous on screen iterations of the Man of Steel and who I feel has been the best Superman. Now, all due respect to all the fantastic animated voice guys, Tim Daly being a favorite of mine from his time with Superman on the animated series and the Justice League, respectively, and several other greats. Even one live action person who won't make it, the first man to portray Superman, Kirk Allen, I believe his name, wasn't able to find much with him as Superman. So, really, we'll have about seven gentlemen that we will look at today who have played the Man of Steel either in a movie or a TV adaptation. Kind of go through, talk about the strengths of each of them, and then kind of give some final kind of tiered rankings a little bit to go through. So, if you start with Superman, he is probably the most popular character in pop culture if you go from when he debuted to now, right? He's been surpassed since probably on the DCN by Batman and overall by Spider-Man. But if you go from his debut, when you say the word superhero, most people picture Superman. And so there's been a lot of men to play the character, but one man, the first one we'll talk about today, George Reeves, for a long time was Superman for folks. Now, while that series has fallen to, to time and it's a little bit harder to find some of his appearances, even the movie he was in, Superman and the Mole Men, I think the thing with Reeves is you do have to give a lot of respect for George Reeves, is he is sort of the forerunner of most of this. He is the most known Superman to start the long running TV show as well. He had a great cameo appearance, I think, on I Love Lucy as well, that he's probably almost more known for than his Superman work. I think with George Reeves, while it's a little more difficult to judge him in that you have a completely different time period in terms of special effects and in terms of script writing, how they approach superheroes, and just the overall kind of acting that was at that time. And the actors were just trained differently. And so he is a little over the top and a little grandiose at times. What I do think George Reeves does a very good job at is he is your classic square jawed superhero. He brings a ton of life to Clark Kent as well as Superman. There's a really good balance there. And so I won't pretend to be the biggest fan of George Reeves, but if you do go back and watch what he was in, especially given the source material that was there at the time, he's spot on in his performance. He's really enjoyable to watch in the role, has a lot of charisma, and he plays the very square-jawed superhero portion very well. So I think George Reeves deserves a lot of respect in that for a lot of folks before the internet, before all this stuff, he was Superman for so many people. And I think he did a really great job with it. He's kind of a just classic actor playing a super role. I think he does a good job, even though there are some things that are a bit lifeless or maybe a little over the top at times. You go to the second man to portray Superman, Christopher Reeves, and there's really not much that you can say about him that hasn't been said. He has been so popular as Superman that in the comics, artists like Gary Frank even draw Superman in continuity to look like Christopher Reeves. There's all kinds of like statues and things out there where you can tell the face modeling was Christopher Reeves. Culturally, he is Superman for so many, especially given everything that he suffered and what he did after as a result of his tragic accident. Where Christopher Reeves, if you just examine him as Superman, it's really difficult to nitpick anything about his actual performance, and that the only things that aren't great with Christopher Reeves are more a product of the writing of the time and the way they approached the character than as to anything that he actually did. He portrays the kindness, the happiness, the joy, the just the good guy neighbor that you would want to have in Superman, and does that so well. But he also, at times when he has to be a little angry and bring a little edge to the character in certain scenes, he does a great job with that well. His Clark Kent is probably the weak part of this, in that his Clark is clearly a caricature most of the time. And it's where you kind of get that weird, what's it, Kill Bill with the scene where they talk about how Clark Kent is his critique on humanity, which I've always thought was kind of a stupid point. But I think overall, the thing with Reeves is in the scenes that he has with Margot Kidder, the way he plays that relationship off, there's never been better chemistry between a Superman and a Lois. He's just fantastic all around in the role. And from a physical standpoint, he plays Superman great. And I've never really seen Superman. I'm never a huge fan of when they portray Superman as the more kind of like hulked out superhero. Just doesn't seem like it would be necessary for the character. He should certainly be in shape. But I think Chris Reeves kind of brings that country strong sort of look that you'd want. Again, all these guys playing this are better shape than most of us normal folks. But I think he brings that kind of look of like that could be a farm boy from Kansas kind of thing. Overall, fantastic actor, plays the role incredibly well. There's not much more in these, but he's iconic and he deserves to be. He's fantastic, even if some of the films like Superman 3 and Superman 4 sort of let him down at the end. Going to the third actor, you have Dean Cain, who played him on television, long running show. It's interesting with Dean Cain in that Dean Cain I think was not great in either Superman or Clark, but does them both pretty well. And I think the thing is, I think his Superman is worse than his Clark Kent. I think he actually brings a ton of nuance and humanity to Clark. And I think the relationship he had with Terry Hatcher, there was a real focus on Clark on the show, probably for budgetary reasons. But he seemed to be the one who dove most into actually being Clark Kent. And some of that's a byproduct of the space that a television show allows you. But I do think his Clark Kent scenes were really, really good and intriguing, and you cared about that aspect of Superman in a way that you really didn't in other previous iterations. His Superman's fine, he's kind, he's caring. There's just nothing special, in my opinion, about Dean Cain playing Superman. Not to say that he's bad, but I think he's kind of approximating what Reeves did, but not doing it quite as well. And there's nothing really individualistically that he brings to the character. He is serviceable in both, and I do think if you go back and watch the show, yes, there is some, budgetary things and some different limitations that the show has, but he's really solid at both sides of the character. And so while I don't think he's fantastic at either one, I think encompassing the totality of the character, Dean Cain actually did a really good job. You move on to the fourth guy that we'll talk about playing Superman, the longest running one, 10 seasons, Tom Welling as Clark Kent on Smallville. Now, he's an interesting one in that really, outside of that cheap last second thing in the suit that they gave us, he really didn't play the official Superman of the show. You had those ridiculous like red, blue, blur, and different names they were calling him at times. And so we had about 3 or 4 seasons where he's running around in some variation of what looks like a costume and being a superhero, but not yet Superman. Tom Welling's really hard to approximate in that technically he is never playing Superman in the series. He is just playing kind of Clark Kent throughout. So I do think the things that Tom Welling did really, really well. I think the idea of someone adjusting to the abilities of Superman and having to deal with that had never been put on an actor really before. There wasn't a ton of that in any of the Superman material before. And since the subject matter really focused on Superman becoming Superman, he had an opportunity to do something unique and different. And so I think the idea of playing a younger, not yet Superman, but still coming across every time as someone who seemed consistent with Clark Kent, I think was pretty cool for him. Where I do think he kind of lacks a little bit, and some of this is just, it's the CW of it all. There is some dramatic scenes where he's not the greatest. There are some really bad storylines on the show that do look poorly on him. And his Clark Kent always has a little too much anger and edge to it. But overall, that's more writing than it is anything Welling did. I think the only thing for Tom Welling that I would take is there's just a little bit of a too cool for school vibe from Tom Welling. Not overly the top. But I think in the early seasons, he really played a believable Clark Kent. As the show carried on, he just got a little too cool and edgy to be Superman. I think some of that's the actor, a lot of that's the writing. And so I love Smallville, love that show, even though it's got some horrible episodes. I think Tom Welling kind of goes down a little bit in that there's a little bit, just something missing that never connected. And again, unfortunately for him, he never really got the opportunity to play the big blue Boy Scout side of the character. But I do think for what he had, he did a great job. You get to the fifth guy that we'll talk about on here, Brandon Routh, who gets in, got a movie for him. I think what really did benefit him, he got the Crisis on Infinite Earths and got the opportunity to reprise the role, which was really, really cool, especially with the Kingdom Come suit. Routh is really interesting in that I think he was a good Superman. I really do. My problem with him, and this is probably not his fault at all, is that Superman Returns largely just wanted to be another Chris Reeves movie. And so as I kind of saw it, it was just a guy doing a Chris Reeves impression rather than doing anything himself with the character. So it's kind of Brandon Routh playing Chris Reeves playing Superman sort of feel to it. It's kind of like watching a really, really good Elvis impersonator. They may be great, but at the end of the day, it's not Elvis. And as a result, it does come across a little weird because he just didn't bring anything individualistically to the role. He does get a lot of the things that Reeves did well, but it's really hard to judge Routh as Superman because he's only got the one film, and the majority of it, they're just having the scenes where he's trying to act like Chris Reeves. That said, he does excel at those parts really, really well. And that amazing scene where Superman catches the plane is one of the coolest, maybe the coolest single Superman scene in any movie that's been produced to date. What does hurt him a bit, the lack of chemistry with the Lois Lane that was in the movie, just never bought him and Kate Bosworth as a couple. Some of that's casting, but some of that's acting ability as well. And those parts were just dry and boring and really kind of killed that movie, I think, for a lot of folks. So while I think Ralph is pretty good, I think he has just a little bit missing. I did like a lot that he got the chance to play, even though Crisis on Infinite Earths on the CW was awful. It was so cool to see him come back in the suit. And I do think he unfairly got blamed for some things that were not his fault. But I do think he's a solid Superman. It's just a little hard because he's a little bit like a tribute band kind of thing to Chris Reeves. And that's a little difficult to sort of separate him from that. You go to the last two that have played the role, and probably the most controversial would be is the sixth guy we'll talk about, which is Henry Cavill. And I think he's the guy that I actually feel really, really bad for. And I think sadly for Cavill, this seemed to happen with The Witcher for him as well, is that him being kind of a nerd in his personal life, he really cares, researches, and knows these characters. And so there's such a stark contrast of when you hear Henry Cavill talk about how he sees Superman and what he wanted to do as opposed to what was kind of put upon him for these movies. What I will say is kind of like George Clooney with Batman. Whilst the material is guilty for a lot of it, the actor also didn't do anything to elevate it past the material. So maybe he was, and they were coaching it out of him or telling him not to do it. But it is really hard to see Henry Cavill as Superman. And outside of a few fleeting moments where I think he does a great job, and I do think there's some genuine weight and gravitas to him being Superman, the problem is he's just too much of the angry, isolated space, tortured space Jesus kind of thing that Zack Snyder wanted to do. And that got really, really bad as the series went on. In the Justice League movie, there were some opportunities where he was afforded to act like Superman a bit more, but those are almost impossible to judge because you have the horrifying rubber lip in there that just distracts and takes you out of all of those scenes. I think when he did get a chance, Cavill excelled, and I do think the physique wise, he really did a good job putting himself in the role of feeling like Superman. It's just the problem that he has is the material really, really doesn't match up. And while I personally like Man of Steel and think there's some fantastic moments in that movie where he comes across as Superman, sadly, the rest of the series is so bad. And the moments for Superman where he's just dark and morose and boring really take away from him. I do give him some credit in that I think the physicality and bringing the Superman fight scenes together really worked well, and he did that better than any other actor. Some of that, again, is the material providing the opportunity to do so, but I thought he did well with those. But it's difficult, and I do genuinely feel bad for Cavill because I think he wanted to do more with the character than he was ever allowed to do. And then you go to the final guy to play Superman. Up until David Cornsweet, we've seen some trailers and previews, and so obviously we'll kind of see how he does with the whole film. But the last guy, most notably of again the CW, but on the TV show Superman and Lois, Tyler Hoechlin, who played the character, had some opportunities to, I think, guest star on like Supergirl and a couple crossovers. And then he really came into his own with the TV series. And so while I have all kinds of problems with Superman and Lois, the TV series, I think it sadly just seemed unfocused and, pretty poor writing at some points. What I will always give the show credit for is the Clark Kent pieces of that show is done really well. And where I have to give Hoechlin a ton of credit he, more than almost any actor, I think, got the duality of Superman correctly. In that, one thing that's weird is, and I don't take this out on Chris Reeves because of the source material, but Superman is truly Clark Kent and Superman's the mask. And sadly, felt like Reeves was a little more of a Batman thing where Clark Kent's a fake and Superman's the real persona. So I think Hochland did a great job of, you can clearly tell Clark Kent is who he's supposed to be. That's who he wants to be. That's the true face, and Superman's more the public facing, enhanced version of it. I think he did a great job with that. The chemistry he had with Lois really, really helped. Again, some of that's the actors that are there, but you really bought that romance and that developed across time. He did play the friendly neighbor, great dad kind of role that you'd expect Superman really, really well. There's some absolutely standout scenes, where he gets mad as Clark Kent and kind of handles things like a dad. And it just seems so perfectly Superman. The Fleischer suit scene they had is one of the best Superman scenes that's ever been put to screen. He really excelled in the role. What I do hold against him a little bit, the early appearances on Supergirl were so bad for the character. Superman was so poorly portrayed. And again, a lot of that's the writing, but you do kind of have to hold it a little against the actor of not elevating that material. Overall, I do think he's a really, really great Superman, though. And that while he probably is a little shorter than most of the other guys who have played Superman, he brought the necessary physicality to it. And there was just a kind hearted approach that he portrayed in the show that really fit with Superman. Sadly, I wish he had been given an opportunity to do the show longer or been given a big screen platform, because he really did quite well with the show overall. And I think he did excellent in the role of Superman. So 7 gentlemen overall, kind of ranking them. I don't like doing 1 through 7. I kind of do like a tiered sort of thing of how I see the guys. And so last for me on this, if I kind of tiered rank these, I'd say the last place guy, better than Bizarro. Like, he's better than that, is Brandon Routh. I would have him last. Now, again, my problem with Routh is it's a tribute band sort of thing. He's like an Elvis impersonator of Chris Reeves' performance. And so it's really difficult to give him any credit for playing Superman, because he's just playing Chris Reeves more than he's playing Superman. He does do great in it, and I do feel bad for him and that he wasn't given more of an opportunity in a runway. And when he talks about the character, you can tell he loved the character and thought he played it for a long time. Just sadly, he got shoehorned into that movie. And so I don't really see him as Superman so much as I see him as a guy who played Chris Reeves really well. Henry Cavill would be sixth on the list. I feel bad doing that. I like Cavill a lot. I think he did a good job in Man of Steel. But he's basically Injustice Superman. That's where I'd have him second to last on the list. When he's given an opportunity to shine as Superman, he does a great job with it. But he's too angry, too isolated, too much focus on him being bad. And again, Batman versus Superman and the Justice League movie are just such poor representations of Superman that it's really hard to put any positive stock in that. So I'd have to have Cavill six. For 4 and 5, I would actually have Dean Cain and Tom Welling tied, kind of halfway there for these two guys. I think they were like 50% of the way. They were great. I think Dean Cain did a fantastic job playing like Clark Kent and making you like the character. And I think Tom Welling similarly did the same thing. It's just, I never really bought the Superman aspect of it. And so some of that's their credit in that I think for both of them, the Superman piece wasn't as huge a part for them. And the Clark Kent parts they carried really, really well. It just never meshed all the way for both. If I had to organize one over the other, I would put Cain over Welling, so by Cain in fourth, Welling in fifth. But both of them are just, they're close. Like, they got 50% of the role. Third for me, so this is the respect the classics category, the bronze medalist, George Reeves. And again, some of that is just respecting the fact that that man was Superman for so many people. And in a period of time where there wasn't a ton of comics, no video game adaptations, no movies, no big screen, all that stuff, he was the public face of Superman for so many. And given the source material that was available at the time and the way everyone viewed superheroes, he knocks out of the park with what he does. There are some things missing from it, and there's a little bit of an over the topness at times, but I do have to give him credit, and I'd put him at third. Second place guy, silver medalist, I'd say the man of tomorrow, Tyler Hoechlin. Fantastic job. If it wasn't for such a strong performance from the number one on this list, he would be number one. He did such a great job playing the character. He played the role of Clark in a relationship with Lois great. He played the Superman piece well. He played the Clark Kent piece well. And the source material they mined from with him being a dad, even though they varied it quite a bit, gave him a lot of time to shine as Clark. I thought he was great in the role. The CW-ness of it does hurt him a little bit. So he'd be second. And then the GOAT, the greatest of all time, number one, I got to put Chris Reeves at the top. There is a reason he is seen as Superman by most. There's a reason he's the guy that when artists draw Superman, they typically make it look a little bit more like Chris Reeves. He's just fantastic throughout. He's likable, he's charming, he's friendly. There's great chemistry with him and Lois. And yes, Superman 3 and 4 go off the rails a little bit, but not because of him. He just perfectly encapsulates the character in a way that it's going to be hard for anybody to ever get past Chris Reeves. If you did an all-time list of the greatest superhero castings of all time, he'd certainly be up there, and I wouldn't blame anybody who says he's in fact the greatest superhero casting of all time, because he just knocked it out of the park and did an amazing job. So as predictable as that is, Chris Reeves, you got to give it to him. He, in my opinion, is the greatest of all time as Superman. But let me know, what do you guys think down below? How would you organize the Superman actors? Who do you think the greatest Superman of all time is? Who do you think the worst? Always interested to see if you agree or disagree. Completely okay, folks. Always love seeing your guys' opinions down below. Never pretend to be the expert. Just one guy spouting his opinions. So let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys so much for watching. God bless you. We'll catch you in our next video.